Welcome everyone, another episode of the Monthly Dev. We are already in August 2023, so this should be the episode number 32, I think. So really mind-blowing. I started this as a host in January 2022, so I really made many episodes, and so this basically it's free event where we invite top class speakers to talk about a specific topic. Usually it's 1 hour and a half. It's all offered by daily.dev. I see some people already joined. So let's go fast. Sound check for all the speakers, and then we can start with this presentation. Today the theme is soft skills or human skills, we can call them. So how are you?
Good. How about you?
Nice.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everyone.
I'm good.
Perfect. So sound check is done. I'm always hyped when I listen to the theme song, intro song. Nice. Okay, so let's stay 1 hour and a half with us. A super fast reminder for the format. So there will be 30 minutes each for each presentation. And at the end of the presentation, around 25 minutes, we have also 5 minutes of Q&A. So if you drop your questions, I'll save them and we'll ask them to the speakers at the end. So hi everyone. We are about to start this event. And yes, I'm super excited. So I think that it's time. So now I'll kick Guy and Emmy and just stay with Abbey for first. So thank you and see you later, of course. Nice. Okay, nice. So thank you so much, Abbey, for being here. So Abbey, you are full stack developer for
DQ, yeah.
DQ, yes.
I work on a web dashboard, yeah.
Nice. And I think that your presentation today is very, very important because it's about to get started. So as we start in this with this event, so can you give a bit of a spoiler before we start of this presentation? Hi everyone, by the way.
A little bit of a spoiler, yeah. I want to talk to y'all about when you're handed a code base and told to learn it, and where do you start? What do you do? Please don't panic. That's basically the spoiler.
Absolutely. I think this is something super interesting. So even if now I have some experience, but at the very beginning, I see that many people are really lost at the beginning because maybe if we have been in tech for a while, we give some things for granted because we go in automatic mode, we can say. But I think this can be super, super interesting, not just for the beginners, but for everyone. As a refresher, so Abbey, when you're ready, I can start sharing your screen, and then we can just step into it. Let's go.
Sounds good. Ready to go.
Perfect. So, best of luck getting started in a new code base. And yes, so good luck and see you later. Bye.
Bye.
And stay in the chat. Bye.
Hey, I'm Abbey. I'm here to talk to you about getting started in a new code base. And like all my talks, there's a blog version of this. So there will be a QR code to that at the end. And whether you're getting started in open source or starting a new job, there's a frequent expectation that a developer is just handed like a fantasy epic length tome of just tens of thousands of lines of code. And you're just given it and told, learn this. And there's no instruction. There's no like communication of expectations. What does learning mean? How do you do it? And every developer goes through it at some point. I remember in my very first developer job, it was a legacy app. There wasn't documentation. And I was just staring into the abyss and listening to people read code at me and told to read code. And now I have enough experience to break it down for you, give you some tips and some steps so that you can get started in a code base, hit the ground running, and don't panic, because the first step is not panicking. And why? Because the very first thing you have to do anytime you're handed a code base is get a local copy on your machine. We don't have to worry about any of the steps after that. We don't have to worry about what the code base is like until after we get a local copy on our machine. So rest assured, everybody has to go through this first step. We can all do it. Just download the app in Git. It's called cloning the repo. And from there, we move on to step 2, which is try to get it running locally. And this is where Yoda and I disagree, because there is try in this step. There is literally only try, because if you run into a problem and you can't get the code base running, that's a problem that you get to solve before other developers have to experience it too. You're already net positive, you've solved a problem, you can get in the documentation or solve whatever problem has come up. In open source, it's usually something like, I don't know, you're the first person to ever run this code base on an M1 chip machine, and the code base does not play nice with M1 chips. So now you have to figure out what would make it play nice, and that's a PR so you can submit after you've solved that problem. In joining a new workplace and getting started in a new app for your job, it's usually something like somebody forgot to write down that you need this specific permission to run this part of the app, or there's a step missing in the documentation, or other things. So no matter what happens, we're still going to move on to steps 3 and 4 about learning about the code base. And even if you don't get it running, you're still net positive. So there's only try. I've got a little advice for people trying to get a code base running. Ideally, there's a README in the root directory of the project. This is the file that, if you go to a GitHub repository page, shows directly underneath the file directory. It should have all the information you need to run a code base. If someone wrote it, if they didn't write it, then you're going to start looking for the manifest files. And a manifest file is a file that has information about the code base itself. I'm most familiar with the JavaScript ecosystem, so with NPM and Yarn, this is usually the package.json. It has all the information the package manager needs to download all the packages and get the project set up for you. And it also has other information about the project and sometimes, hopefully, a script section. So if you see scripts in that section that are named run, test, build, you can run them with your package manager, like npm run, npm test, npm build, right in the terminal. If the script section doesn't exist in the manifest file, then you start looking for outermost files. These are typically called index, or the same name as the project or directory it's in. Ideally, these are in the root directory, and you try to execute them in your terminal by navigating to that directory, hitting period, / name of the file, enter, and then hopefully the whole project starts running. There are some projects that are set up with subdirectories with multiple tools, and maybe one of them runs all of them, or they all run individually, but the same kind of system applies. You're looking for files named index or that have the same name as the directory or project. If you get one of these files running, then you can use the help flag, which is --help or -h after the command you run to run the file. Ideally, again, if it's set up, there will be a help message that prints out and it'll give you helpful commands you can use with the project. If you do get commands, then you can try running man space command enter in your terminal. And this is on Mac and Linux. There may be a user manual set up and you may get an entire page that's even more helpful than the help message that you got before. If you're on Windows, you're going to have to download a package named Groff. It displays the user manual page in the browser. So if you're on Mac and Linux, you may want to download that package as well. It's probably easier than reading it in your terminal. But whether or not the project is running at this point, we're still moving on to steps 3 and 4. So step 3 is look for documentation. Developer-focused documentation may exist outside of the project. We were talking about the README that's inside the code base, but even in GitHub, there are plenty of places to write things down, like discussions and wikis. If you're in open source, there's often a lot of information surrounding the project in GitHub that you can find. At companies, I've seen things like external docs sites, internal intranet pages, a Google Docs link that's just passed around between developers, PDF that's just passed around between developers. So it may exist and you just haven't found it yet. The next thing that you want as soon as possible is a deployed environment, because a running version of the project is documentation in and of itself. If you have it like kind of running on your local machine, but you're getting this message that's like, whoops, something went wrong. But then you look at the deployed version and it's got all this data that seems like really important, but you weren't told to put that data in the local version, then you're already seeing differences and able to troubleshoot just because you have a working version in front of you. The next thing that I look for is user focus, so like a user manual or documentation that was written for other teams. Like sometimes marketing will be given a presentation that has what the feature is, why it was written, what problems it solves, all to explain to users about how awesome it is and why they should get the product because this feature was just added. And those are all high level for users and non-technical people. And when you're already absorbing a lot of information, this is perfect. Even later down the line, when I've already been working on the project for a while, I've found out about features or multiple ways to use features from the user manual that I wouldn't have found out about otherwise. So now we move on to documentation that most people don't consider documentation. This is useful for you when you're in an environment that doesn't prioritize documentation. They may not write any docs, but they write tests. And what are tests if not a one-sentence explanation of what the app should or shouldn't do, and then some code to test that? So if you're looking at a test file, you get basically bullet pointed what the app should do, what the app shouldn't do in that section of the app, and that's documentation. Similarly, GitHub and Git, even if no developer on the project has ever written a useful commit message, you run git log and you just see streams of emojis, you can still get useful information from that, right? You can run git blame and find out if there's someone at the company who has worked on the project and just is on another team now. You can find out the timeline of features. And then within GitHub itself, there's so much information, especially as I mentioned, if you're in open source. GitHub issues and discussions often have a lot of conversations about where the product is going, what we want to see. GitHub PRs will show you the code review process. GitHub branches will tell you how the team is naming their branches. There is a lot of information that you can get outside of commit messages too. The final one I like to mention is tickets, because if it's your first day and you see an error, unless it's related to your own personal problems running the code base, there might be a ticket about it already, and you should check before you start complaining to people. As well as there is so much information you can glean about a team process or a open source repository just from the tickets. GitHub issues obviously have the conversations, but if you're using a work tracking system like Jira, typically tickets will move into different categories. So they start in development and then they move to review and then they move to QA. So you already know that there's a code review process and a QA process that every ticket has to make it through, as well as labels both in GitHub issues and work tracking systems and the information that's included in tickets. So you may know that developers are given a lot of latitude when they build features because they're only given a little bit of information, or every feature is meticulously planned and you can see it in the ticket creation process. So definitely check out the tickets as well. And then we're going to move on to step 4, which may be shocking. Talk to people. Obviously, you want to talk to other developers. You want to ask them what they wish they knew when they started, what tools they find useful for this specific project, so browser extensions, editor plugins, state inspectors, etc. If you hear about a bug fix, ask to pair with them while they work on the bug fix. Watching other developers troubleshoot is fantastic for getting situated in a new code base. If you run into problems with your code, you also want to ask to pair because they know things about the code base that you don't. If asking for help about your code strikes fear into your heart, definitely check out this guide that I've linked. It gives you a template for giving the other developer as much information as they need about your coding problem. And you'll often find that if you give developers like this, and this I tried and they didn't work, they'll often be like, but why didn't that work? Now I'm interested in this problem and I want to help solve the puzzle with you. So definitely get empowered to ask questions about your code that way. If you hear about a bug fix, but you didn't have an opportunity to pair with the developer on it, ask them what they checked first. This is often how you find out what part of the app breaks the most and what logs are most useful, which are super helpful in troubleshooting. And then you also want to schedule meetings with other members of the team. Codebases don't get this way in a vacuum. There are a bunch of people involved in the codebase that aren't developers. So for example, the product manager can tell you where the product is going in the long term. The product owner can tell you where the product is going in the short term. And that can help you prioritize which parts of the app you're learning so that you can get up to speed on the things that will be most useful in the short term. QA, I love talking to QA. They're the best. They'll tell you what breaks the most, what bugs keep coming across their plate, what they need fixed so that they can help you catch bugs more often, all that kind of stuff. Love talking to QA. For open source, this is often talking to maintainers, talking to other contributors, and joining any community forums or discords or anything related to the project. There's a lot of information out there, especially when there's a large user base. So you definitely want to talk to the people that you're going to be working with. Next, we're talking knowing the business, because understanding the code is easier with context. It's just a fact of life that industry terms and acronyms will make it into variable names. So if you want to understand the code easier while you're reading it, understanding industry terms will help you. For open source, this is really like knowing the user base, knowing the problem you're trying to solve. It's a little bit of the industry too, but it's definitely understanding why you're building something and who you're looking to help. The other thing that knowing the business will really help you with is catching design flaws early, especially in highly regulated industries. So if you're working in something like banking, you know that there is data that can never be exposed. And then you're looking at a product design in a meeting that is exposing that exact data. You can catch that before it's more expensive to fix down the line, or your company gets a lawsuit, which is saving the company money, which looks great at performance review and interview time. It'll also just be easier to understand meetings and predict edge cases if you understand the terms that everybody's using. I've definitely been at companies that pass around a acronym document, and I've always found that super helpful. So we've talked about learning about the code base, reading things, talking to people. Now we have a bunch of information, so let's put that information into mental models. You want to be able to explain the app at a high level. I have some tools here, Miro and Whimsical, that help you write or make beautiful diagrams very easily. They give you the option to just put a box on the page, put arrows in between it, you can make flowcharts, you can make diagrams, super great, you can share them. I also have Write It Out. And these three things are manual for a reason, really 3 reasons. The first one is anyone who's worked at like a corporate job as a developer can tell you that permissions are so hard to get. There's always a permission that someone's forgetting, or a permission you need to do a thing that only comes up every once in a while. And when you're just starting, getting more permissions is already difficult enough. But there's also like NDAs and proprietary code. You may not be able to feed the code base into a code visualization tool or AI. The second is whatever it spits out may be wrong, and you don't know enough to know that it's wrong. The third is how our brains work with learning. So we've been reading, we've been looking at things, we've been absorbing information, but taking all that information and reassembling it into a cohesive whole that represents something that makes sense to you is a different type of learning that is more likely to put that information in the long-term storage in your brain. Once you have this ability to explain the app at a high level, you can explain it to non-technical people better, whether that's pulling up the diagram itself and pointing at the boxes and being like, this box talks to this box, but these 2 boxes don't talk together. So to do the thing that you're asking me to do, I would have to build the thing where these boxes talk to each other, is way easier than trying to explain PubSub to someone. So that is always useful. Also, this is building documentation if it doesn't exist. So like, what things are we writing out? What mental models are we making? If no one has ever written down every API endpoint and the response structure and the request structure, that's always a great thing to write out. I like diagramming the files and components and how they relate to each other, because you'll often get components that are importing each other and it's all nested and you want to know what's getting passed where. Data flows, the way the data flows through the app. If there are any integrations, microservices, or PubSub, diagram that stuff out. Oh my gosh, it's so much easier to look at the boxes and be like, okay, so it goes through this daemon and then it gets sent, and then the PubSub goes, rather than trying to picture that in your head. Once you have done all this, take it to someone who's worked on the app for a while and ask them where you got it wrong. You'll often find that you have a misconception about what talks to each other, or have missed a box that is very useful. This will also help you when you're trying to find like useful logs while you're troubleshooting, because if you forget that it goes through 3 boxes, you've forgotten about 3 places that you could find a log that maybe will show you the error why everything is going wrong. All right. So now we've talked about all the lovely information gathering and putting it all together, but let's get to the fun stuff. Break it. Delete a line. Use a debugger. Feed the app bad data, I dare you. Remove some props that are passed to a component just to see how it breaks. Read the logs that you've created with your mess. If you've seen the app break that way before, when you actually get a bug fix ticket and it's on a deadline, it'll be easier to narrow down what part of the app has broken, so you don't have to go through that process of narrowing it down, and you can fix the bug quicker. This is just recognizing patterns in how the app works. After break it, obviously comes fix it. Senior developers have to do this. Anyone coming to a new team or repo with its own process has to learn that the process that every ticket goes through. I recommend doing it with like a typo you find, or a really small bug, or something bite-sized, because if you don't have to worry about your beautiful code being perfectly refactored and working as it goes through all the different environments, and have just like changed one letter somewhere, you can watch the process and the ticket going through all the process without much stress. And then you can just focus on learning the process. And when you get that bigger ticket, then you can focus on the ticket. You've already learned the process. All right. The final step is give it time. Learning the code base feels so urgent, but you can't learn everything at once. With every PR, you're going to learn a little bit more, you understand the entire system a little bit more. And a typical expectation should be about 6 months to ramp up. So if you are able to get useful code into that repository within 6 months, you are doing fantastic. It is a huge task to learn any code base, and people really, really downplay it. So give yourself grace. Remember your self-care, your eating, your hydrating. We all got to do it, because you got to be nice to yourself. You're doing a lot with your brain. All right, that's the end. I hope that the next time you go to get started in a new code base, you don't panic, because that's step 1. And here's the QR code to the blog and some links to find me and handles and stuff if you want to find me. But yeah, thank you for coming to the talk.
I thought I was the only person who like just broke the code on purpose just to see how things are going. So now I feel less alone in the world. Thank you so much, Abbey. This is I really feel way better now.
That's my favorite way.
Absolutely, yes. So we have many questions. So
awesome.
let's jump straight into them. And thank you so much. Really great presentation.
Good.
So we have one by Devanshu about projects with different styles, different standards. Maybe what is the same, and how we should behave for different projects, because one project can be very, very small, one can be very big. So basically, how can we adapt? Because I think we have to adapt, of course.
Yeah, I mean, that really comes down to talking to people. If it's not written down, I am a big supporter of developers writing down their standards in the repo. So a lot of times in open source, you'll see a contributing.md, which tells you what they expect from a PR that you open. And that should be the standard, but it often is not. So oftentimes, if I've opened a PR and someone starts talking to me about all these standards that I've missed, I will start helping them update their documentation, because that's the kind of person I am. And I will go back and forth with them, obviously, on things that I've missed, but hopefully all of that is upfront. If it's not, then there's no way that you could have known. And the only way that you can know is to write it down, remember it in the future, next time it comes up. Unfortunately, there is no like one standard way that any repository works. And I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, but I have been in a lot of legacy situations where like everyone has left. So now I'm the person making the standards, or different situations where there's not a lot to go on. So if people are there, talk to them. If people are not there, write it down. And as much as you can, be nice to people in code reviews, because they're trying their best, and code is a creative art, and they're going to have feelings about their code.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very important when we start on a code base, if you're working for a company, to let them know that it's like we need time to save time later, because I've been in companies. It was one of my questions, like what if a company says like, okay, but we have to get started like in hours, like today, in 30 minutes. So it's because I don't know, because maybe they see this just from the productive point of view, and they don't understand what does it take to understand a project. So yeah, probably in this case, we should let them know in a very clear way. I think this also gives us a lot of authority. Like, let me do, like I know what I'm doing. That's my job. So yeah. It's absolutely nice. Thank you. Really enjoying this first presentation. So by Nabaraj, hope I pronounced that decently. In my case, building software is hard to convert things into business. So let's say more on like getting started in a project that maybe you want to convert into business, into something. So in this case, what would you suggest to do? Maybe something different, or something like if you're already just thinking that this will become something in the future.
Talk to users, unfortunately, is usually the answer, because you're building something to solve a problem. So if that problem is not marketable, what problem are the users actually looking for you to solve? Because we understand how things work, right? When my TV app stops working, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, so the internet connection probably went down. But most users just don't care. They just care that the app stopped working. So once you can start putting yourselves in the shoes of users, or if that is difficult for you, just ask the users directly. Then you start understanding, when you sit down to write code, using a like problem development driven situation is more likely to create something that people are willing to pay for. As far as applying the business or the industry, like I talked about, to the code base, that also involves understanding your users, talking to your users. So if you get a chance, get that deployed development and use your deployed environment and use your product for the thing that it was useful for. Right now, I'm working on a mobile team and I'm a web developer. And after a while, they were like, no, really, you have to set up the mobile apps and use the product so that you understand what is happening, because we started causing problems by manually editing the scans because we didn't want to learn mobile development.
Nice. So, Abbey, super fast, because I see that people are now starting dropping many questions. So let's go with two more, and then maybe at the end, I don't know, we'll see. If you're a beginner in an open source project, should you always ask for a code review?
Yes, with the caveat that you understand the difference between feedback and unsupported criticism. So you want feedback, which gives you ways to improve on your code and explains the problems that they're seeing. You don't want, this code is bad. I came from my first job, I got 0 code review. And in this job, I get a lot of code review. And my code, the way I think about code, my ability to refactor code, everything has improved greatly. So I really believe in the code review process.
Yeah. I always like analogies with sports. So think like a personal trainer saying like, you are doing the exercise wrong. But what? It's absolutely a mess. It's you have no chances. So
code smell, I hate it. Can't do that term.
Absolutely. So this probably would say something about the reviewer. Yeah, I love the decoration behind and the painting, of course. You are set for Christmas. The question is talking to the architect, if there is an architect, the fastest way to understand the code base.
Yeah, I love explanations of architectural decisions, like why we chose this tech stack, why we did this, when and why we made these products. But it's rarely written down, and the person who did that may not still be there. There may never have been a actual architect on the team. So then it really comes down to your learning style, right? Because I listed a bunch of ways to learn about how the code was made, but Francesco and I are both like, I just like breaking it. So it's up to you, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Nimrod, the CEO of daily.dev. So he always comes also to attend these presentations, and today is about soft skills. So this is literally for everyone, maybe not just developers. So of course we're talking to developers, but many things that we have in these presentations probably they'll apply to normal like human behaviors at work and maybe also in life. So thank you so much, Abbey. We are done with the time. So great, amazing presentation. Love it. It was funny, educational. So it was really great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Nice. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Okay. Nice. So, Guy, thank you so much for waiting. We are on time, and I really wanted to be on time because your presentation is about time. So I didn't want to look bad, like say, okay, so I have this person talking about time management, and I invite him 5 minutes later. So it would not make sense. So
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So you work at AppsFlyer, right? You have been working there for like 6 years.
6 years.
Which in tech is like it's a lot. It's a lot.
I'm a dinosaur, you know.
Yeah. In another field, like working 6 years. Okay, so it seems that you like working at that company. In tech, 6 years, it means that you did a lot. For sure, you did a lot of stuff. So, Guy, please introduce yourself. If you want to give a spoiler of the presentation, share your screen, and then I'll let you start. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so hi, my name is Guy Grinapell. I'm an engineering manager at AppsFlyer in Israel, and we're going to talk today about time management, which is not the most fun things for most people, but I'm going to make it much easier for you, and I hope you will gain some tools and concepts you can implement right away. So that's the spoiler. I'm going to share my screen.
Nice. Yes, basically 6 years are like 200 years in JavaScript. Nice. And for example, we already have some questions. If you have a question during the presentation, just put a Q in brackets so you make my life easier. And then at the end, as we did with Abbey, we can start. You can share your screen in the meanwhile if you want, okay?
I'm doing that.
And yes, but yes, we are really waiting. And yes, so there is also Emmy, which will be later, the next speaker. So let's do it. Perfect. Okay, so it started to rain a lot. That was a thunder on my end. So I think I'm gonna close the window now. Guy, thank you, and let's get started. Perfect. Nice. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
So, hi everyone. As I said, my name is Guy, and my goal is to make this talk as practical as possible. And I hope that by the end you can gain the tools and concept you can implement right away. I will mention that this is a shorter version of a workshop that I'm doing to build fully tailor-made time management and task management frameworks. So this is you. ready to open your day. You open your MacBook and you're ready to a full productive day. You are full of motivation and you can imagine how you're taking over all your tasks. And then reality hits. Your beloved colleagues, the endless distractions and the chaotic environment all around you. And at a certain point, you start wondering, how will I get anything done? And there's so much to get done, right? Our plates are always just full with everything. We need to break down our tasks and plan our work, and we have meetings and code reviews and design reviews, and we have more meetings, and then production incidents and P0s and documentation, and then more meetings and monitoring and improving our dashboards and some bugs. But what about that feature that you've been holding, you've been pushing back with your product for the past 3 sprints? What about learning Rust that you've been really wanting to do in the past few months? And what about this Medium blog post that you want to write about this project you ran in the past quarter? Oh, and by the way, your coffee got cold in the meantime. Sorry. I'm sure you all know this feeling where you're crossing off one task from your list and then another one just pops out and it happens again and again, and then another 2, and then a ton more appears. It's a brutal, endless race. It's also referred to as the productivity paradox. The more you accomplish, the more your plate seems to hold. So hi there again, my name is Guy, as I said. Just a few words about myself so you know who you're talking to. This is my lovely wife, Nitzan, and our dog, Nika. I'm a huge music festival fan. This is me in Tomorrowland about 5 years ago. I love doing CrossFit, and I'm an avid FIFA player in the past 25 years. My journey to solve time began about 10 years ago when I studied computer science. I had my weekly plan with everything inside, including in which nights Nitzan and I are sleeping in which places back when we were just dating. So I've been running this framework for a lot of time, and I iterated over it and improved it along the years. I've read many books about time management. And today I'm going to share with you what works for me. It won't necessarily work for you, and I encourage you to find the things that will work for you, take them and try to implement them. The session will be divided into 2 parts. The first one is the mindset, which is, I believe, to be the mindset required to become a productive professional, regardless of any framework that you will use to manage your time and tasks. The second part will be about the actual framework that I am using, and it will contain very practical tools that you can implement right away. And I hope that by the end of the session, you will make a significant progress in your efforts to reclaim back your day. So let's begin with the mindset. Along the slides, I will have these key slides or key concepts. You can see the key on the top right. And if I want you to take just one thing from my session today, it's this slide, it's this concept. So as I said, I've read many time management books in the past 10 years. And if you've read any, you know that they all say the same thing. Your desk is full of tasks, and here's how you can systematically clear your desk, one by one or in any system. Now, this book, 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman, basically changed my life, to be honest. I read it about 2 years ago. And the reason is that it tackles time in a whole different way. It tells you something like your desk is full of tasks. It will always be full of tasks. And here's why it's okay. So the concept of being or embracing this overwhelm is crucial to become a productive person. Why is that? We all know the feeling where we're in this very stressful situation, right? And everyone approaches us and the product is waiting for an answer, and you have this task and you have the code review over there. And then you wanted to read or hear this talk, and all these input streams of requests are coming and you can't do anything. You're context switching all the time. It's very stressful and you're not getting anything done because you can't focus on what's really important, what's really matters. So my point here is that you need to start developing the feeling of being comfortable with your desk being full all the time. Okay, with being overwhelmed, it's very, very important. And here's just a snapshot from my Slack from a while back. You can see that I have many unread messages and threads and channels. Now, I most definitely do not recommend or encourage you to ignore your colleagues, obviously, but I do recommend that you start paying attention to what is really important, what is really urgent, and what can wait. Now, this is also a key concept in my system, and I'm talking about manage your energy, okay? Now, remember this, when everything is urgent, nothing is, okay? It's very crucial. Now, you can't expect to operate at 100% capacity all day, every day. You need to start paying attention to your energy levels and energy types along the day, along the week. Learn your productive hours and notice when your cognitive energy and focus is very high. That's where you want to do deep work time. And when you have a more, say, energetic and outgoing energy, this is when you want your people time, your people energy, doing all your meetings. These are different times at the day, maybe even during the week. And being efficient is about being fully engaged when you need it, not all the time. This is a key if you want to avoid the burnout. Now, I spoke about when everything is urgent, nothing is. It's a very similar topic. When everything is important, nothing is. Okay, we have balls in the air all the time, and eventually some will fall to the ground. Our job is to manage and decide which balls are okay to fall on the ground and which should never fall on the ground. So cherry pick your tasks. Be less reactive and more proactive. Decide what really is important and what you really want to work on. And learn to say no to people. It's okay, do it nicely. Now, here's a nice trick I use when I feel overwhelmed with a lot of tasks that seem important, okay? Write down your 10 most important tasks, then mark the top 2 tasks that you really need to work on and ignore the rest. It's that simple. Now, this is a big one if you want to both boost your productivity, but also remain happy in the process. I think that one of our most destructive mindset biases that we have is to overlook our achievements. When we fail, when we don't succeed, we tend to pay a lot of attention and to think about it. But when we do succeed, we ignore it or we rush to the next task, right? Remember to celebrate these small wins. You wrote a unit test. You added a section to your design doc. You added a slide to your tech talk presentation. You added a nice, useful comment to a team member's pull request. This is fantastic. You need to acknowledge it, acknowledge the progress you're making. It will both boost your motivation and it will keep you engaged. Now, the last concept about the mindset I want you to develop is about well-being. So being productive is about being, or I will say that productivity is about well-being first, okay? The productivity begins way before you open your MacBook and start working like we saw at the beginning of the slides. I know that you are probably familiar with the feeling that there are days where you can't get anything done. You can't focus on anything. Now, did it ever occur to you that it might be due to lack of sleep, either quality or quantity wise? Maybe it's just due to personal stress, or maybe you just didn't drink enough water. So I'm not a nutritionist. This is not any medical advice, but I do urge you to start paying attention to it. It will impact your energy levels and your focus along the day. And as a derivative, it will impact your productivity, your delivery, your throughput. Okay, I can tell you that my life was changed when my doctor advised me to sleep more than 5 hours per night. I was sleeping 5 hours per night, and he said you should start sleeping at least 7-8 hours per night. And he didn't know that it will also impact my, professional performance, and it did very, very significantly. Now, I acknowledge that some people can't afford this amount of sleeping time, mostly parents, but there are other factors you should take into account. Do you work out regularly? Do you eat regularly? Do you skip meals? Many people skip meals, especially in the working, from anywhere policies. And even just getting sunlight early in the morning. Once you start paying attention to these factors, you will get much more productive. Now let's jump into my framework and start talking about practical tools you can start using today. The first point is coming from a self pain point. I'm being very honest. My short-term memory is terrible. So in order to not forget anything, either my tasks or ideas or notions, I write down everything. I go by the rule of if you think it twice, write it down. You can also go with a more strict rule and say if you think it once, write it down. And if you are wondering in which platform should you do it, so it can be really anything. I recommend doing it in a digital platform, but it can be also a notebook. You can carve it on a stone. I also recommend using some to-do list apps, and I will explain why in just a second. I'm using mostly Notion, Apple Notes, and Todoist app. So the second concept is using a single inbox. Now, when I'm talking about an inbox, I'm referring to an execution inbox and not a communication inbox. Okay, so think of it as where do I need to look in order to find my tasks or my next task? It can be any digital platform that you choose. I am using a Todoist app for it. I tried many different apps, and this one was the best for me, as I said. Now, holding a single task inbox will make your life much easier, both when you insert a new task, okay, where do things go? There. And also when you pop the task or when you pull the task from it, when you need to prioritize, plan your week, or choose what you want to work on next. Now, when you insert new tasks, make sure they're both atomic and have maximal context. What does that mean? So atomic task is the what. Okay, think of it as what would be the very first step I need to do when I want to work on this task, and make sure it's actionable. Okay, make sure it's very clear. Now, a good test to check if it's an atomic task is to look at the task and think, what do I need to do now? What is the very first step? If you don't know, if you're unsure, you need to break it down even more. The maximal context is the how. How are you going to perform this very first step? Think of it as a set of instructions. So I would add any relevant context. It could be relevant URLs, for instance, Jira, Trello, a YouTube link if you want to, I don't know, watch a tech talk or learn about any topic. It can be phone numbers, addresses, contacts, phone numbers, anything. So once you reach the task, you know what to do and how to do it. Now, this is also one of the more important concepts in my framework. Put it in your calendar. Now, some people refer to it as time boxing. And why I do it a little bit different is because I put everything inside. Everything goes in. When do I wake up? When do I eat my meals? When do I commute? And my bedtime and my date night? Everything. Okay, it's very important in order to make this system work. You can use weekly anchors to be filled when you plan your week. We'll discuss it in a minute. And make sure you have critical mass for progress. What does it mean? If you want to do some deep work, you want to code review, you want to write, you want to make progress in your bug you're working on, you need to schedule a slot which is long enough. For me, it's no less than 60 minutes because otherwise it's not effective. And another nice concept I use, it's called pay yourself first. I took it from the 4,000 Week book that I mentioned. Choose one small task that you really want to achieve, you really want to complete or make progress in, and book it for the first slot of the day that you start your work and you're being productive. It goes very good with celebrating small wins. You will start your day with something that you want to work and make progress in, and it will make your days much more positive. Now, I'm going to speak about two concepts. One is take breaks. It's pretty straightforward, but I just want to emphasize that this is not optional. It's crucial. So please take breaks because otherwise the burnout will come very soon. So this is one. The second is batch tasks. Now, I want you to batch tasks in your calendar according to two things. One is energy-based. Okay, which is how much energy do I need and what type of energy? Is it deep work? Is it people? And the second is environment-based. So it can be a location. For instance, there are tasks that I can do only while I'm in the office physically, and there are tasks that I can do when I'm home. It can be your errands, right? So there are errands you do outside, there are errands you do inside your house. And make sure you also batch the tasks by the, sorry? Yeah, okay. Now I want to speak a little bit about some Google Calendar hacks that will help you form this calendar in time boxing. The first one is the busy versus free feature in Google Calendar. I don't know if you've heard of it, but in general, you can set a time slot that is only visible to you. To other people, you seem like you're free, you're available. Now, why it's important? Because I don't want my calendar to be packed and look like I'm completely unavailable to other people. And also, I don't think it's, it's my colleagues' interest to know when is my date night with my wife and when is my bedtime. But to me, it makes my whole week very organized and very easy to manage. The second one is the interview slot or the appointment schedule. You can set a slot in your calendar and allow other people to schedule meetings inside it. And why it's important? It's because you are controlling your own time. You are signaling to your colleagues, hey, I am available to you, but please use this slot on this day or on these days to appoint our meetings, interview slots, time for your team members, etc. And the last concept is the color coding, which you all probably familiar with. This is how I color code. And again, it's very helpful when you want to batch your tasks along the week. It's visually very convenient. And you can also gather some analysis on it, but this is like not the main event here. Every Thursday, I choose Thursday, but you can choose any day of the week. I set a time slot for between 30 and 60 minutes. And I sit in front of my calendar and I do two things. The first one is a retrospective on the past week. What did I plan to do and what did I did along the week, and why the discrepancies appear? So for instance, if I wanted to work on some task A, okay, and then I didn't work on it, I want to understand, I want to learn from it. Why didn't I work on it? Maybe I overplanned. Maybe I did bad prioritizing, and maybe I just didn't respect my time. So remember that if you had some plan and you accomplished 10% of this plan, focus on celebrating the 10% and learn from the other 90% to improve to your next week. Now, the second part of this time slot is the weekly planning for the next week. So go into your execution inbox where we discussed before, reprioritize, make sure you get acquainted with the top priority task, make sure they are atomic with maximal context, and set time for them in your calendar for next week. Fill in your anchors, the deep work time, the meeting slots, the pay yourself time, and be very, very specific. Don't set time to, say, read a tech blog post. Go and find the blog post you want to read and put the link inside. Remember, this is the context, because once you reach this time slot, you want to execute. You don't want to start thinking, where do I begin, and so on. And how it works, it's very simple. I have a new task. It goes inside my prioritized inbox. I schedule it, I execute it, and I retrospective at the end of the week. This is a snapshot from my calendar. I don't know how well you can see it, but I will go through it very quickly. So you can see I have my wake up and breakfast time. Then I take my dog to a walk. Then I have my pay yourself first slot, working on the time box slide. Then I take a break. Then I have a code review slot, and I take a break to eat lunch. Then I have my one-on-ones, and you can see the batching, you can see the breaks, you can see the interview slot and the ad hoc meeting later with product. You can see my workout, my date night, and my bedtime. Now, this is visible only to me. My colleagues will probably only see the professional parts, so it makes your life easier, but you still look available to other people. How do you measure the success of your framework? So it's very, very simple in this framework. This is a concept I took from Indestructible by Nir Eyal, which is an amazing book. You need to ask yourself, when you have this time slot for task A, when you do the retrospective, ask yourself two simple questions. During this time slot, was I working on task A And was I working only on task A? If you answered yes to both questions, then you should celebrate, okay? You should pop up a bottle of champagne and cheer for yourself and give yourself a pat in the back. This is more than most people. Remember that progress is king. You should focus on making progress and not on the vanity metric of crossing off tasks from your to-do list. This is fantastic. I mean, it's not fantastic because you want to focus on only 1 or 2 tasks at a certain time, but in general, this is progress. And people who are measuring themselves by crossing off tasks from their list are not seeing these. They're less happy, they're less productive, and their delivery and throughput are decreased. The final concept of the framework is the trial and error. Now, it goes a long way with the retrospective concept, but it's bigger. It's about the bigger picture. Okay, so what I want you to do is first give yourself some time to test the changes, to test the framework, what works for you. Now, in this time, I want you to both listen to people's feedback. Are you available enough? Is your delivery good enough? But both a little bit ignore the feedback. Why? Because it takes time for people to get used to this unwritten contract that you want to write. Okay, if your SLA with other people increase a little bit, it will take time for them to get used to it. And also, people don't know how to manage their time, so take it into consideration. And one last thing, because it's very important, be forgiving for yourself. Okay, give yourself the credit, the time. It's a little bit like Abbey said. At times you will wander from this framework, and it's fine. I have weeks where I, manage my tasks and I get into this swirl that I talked about at the beginning. It's okay. If you have this framework and system, you can always go back to it and start again. It's very, very useful, and it reduces the stress level significantly. Let's recap real quick. So, it's okay to be overwhelmed. Start developing the feeling of becoming comfortable with your desk being filled with tasks. Manage your energy levels. Get to know your productive hours. Put it in your calendar or it won't happen. Use the time boxing. Batch the tasks according to your energy levels and so on. Everything go in. Progress is king. Focus on making progress rather on crossing off tasks from your to-do list. And finally, trial and error. Make sure you keep improving and iterating over your framework and get to know what works for you, okay? That's pretty much it. I have a QR here if you want to hear more details about the full workshop. And in general, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I'm available over there. And I hope you manage to reclaim your day back. Thank you.
I really loved this presentation, Guy. I apply 99% of the things that you do, so we can also be friends now if you want, because I think this is very important. So I have a past as a coach, so for me, staying fit, it's even more important than do all the, let's say, low details. And the part that I loved the most is like being okay with feeling overwhelmed. Because overwhelmed means it's a status of mind. So the same person that does 4 things can feel overwhelmed because they are not used. One person can do 30 tasks in one day and feel bored. So it's all about how much we are trained about this. So really love this. Yes, they think that you can... if you stay relaxed, let's say, you will perform better, because when we are stressed, our productivity goes to zero. So at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is what we do. So we are trying here, of course, to share tips, colors, amazing, but it's very important. No, it's very important. I do the same, the colors, the stuff. The very important. What matters. By the way, you have here list of things on paper. Probably I should improve this. So as I said, everything. No, this is for the daily task. So I don't forget. So it's nice. Let's jump on the questions. But I really love this. I would like to go deeper on these presentations and more. I'd like to know more. So I'm also on the 4 a.m. club. So I recently started going to my work at 4 a.m. club with Eisenhower magic methods. So this is the question like I also got many times, like at which time do you go to sleep? At which time do you wake up? So what's your point of view on this?
Yeah, so I don't wake up at 4 a.m. because I'm not a morning person, to be honest. My productive hours are between like 9:30 to 12 p.m. But again, if these are the productive hours for you, then it's great. Keep on doing that. About the Eisenhower metrics, you're talking about the urgent versus important. So I personally don't use these metrics. I tried it along the years. It just didn't work great for me. But I know many people who use the Eisenhower metrics, and it works very good for them. It can help you organize your tasks and prioritize your tasks. So if it works for you, then great, keep on doing that.
Yes, and about the productivity hours, I changed my routine based on my productivity hours. For example, I have this strange superpower that as soon as I wake up, I'm already productive. But for example, now at 6 p.m., no matter what time I wake up, at 6 p.m., my productivity goes down. Even if I woke up at 10 a.m., it's the same. So it's about that time. So based on this, for me, waking up early makes me productive. But the truth is to understand when are you productive, and then you base this on that. Thank you. Let's go fast. When I try to do time boxing, I also do this. Almost always it fails, and it also decreases my confidence because of that.
Yeah. Well, it's not really a question, but I will refer to it because I really, I can relate to that. So first of all, if it fails, then you should try maybe do something else. Maybe try to do just a certain partially time boxing and not like your entire week. To me, what works is to put everything inside, but maybe try with just like one task on one day for 60 minutes and see if it works for you. Start respecting your time, and if it still doesn't work, I would consider why it doesn't work. Are you being distracted? Are you being approached by other people? Are you being bored and wandering off? You need to understand why. And about your confidence, I totally get that. And what I said is that you will wander off your framework. It's okay. The key is to get the confidence in the framework and system and go back to it along the way. But it's fine. I mean, as I said, I have weeks where I'm off and I can't do anything right within my framework. But the key is you're playing the long game.
Love it. Yes, we should always zoom out, because I also go to conferences. I celebrated my birthday. We had my girlfriend surprising me. But I think it's, I don't know, maybe we can do a recap. I don't know, when we'll be 60, maybe we'll be 70, maybe you can do a recap of our life, or maybe at the end of the year. But it's not about the single day. And I think that, probably not feeling guilty. I think that this is always the first step, because all of this is for us to become productive. It's not that we are forcing ourselves. It's about finding a way. So probably understanding the reason, as you said. So I'm really enjoying this guy. I don't want to let you go. So Paolo, what part of your framework do you consider the most important for keep consistency? Asking that because usually I separate all my tasks, but I'm failing while executing event scheduling.
Yeah. In general, I would say that the key, the two most important things in this framework are the feeling, the embracing the overwhelm, becoming comfortable with this overwhelm, and also the time boxing to me. Now, if you're failing on the execution, even scheduling, then you need to ask yourself what will work for you. I would say that for you, the key concept would be to forgive yourself more and being more relaxed about it, and understand that, as Francesco said, that we are not being measured on our productivity. You're being measured on your delivery and throughput, and it doesn't work for everyone, as I said.
Yes, and so really loved this presentation, the Q&A, all the stuff. I like that you are trying to give people something to follow, that maybe some parts of this might work for them. It's all about, say, statistics. We are trying to give some tips that usually works for most of the people, and I think at the Final thing is, of course, to really know yourself, your strength, your weaknesses, when you to trick your mind and all that stuff. I loved the celebration things. For example, something that I didn't do very well in the past, I never celebrated, like in the past. Even my thesis, like the day after, was just working. So now I take breaks and celebrate when I get a win. It's way better. It's not a waste of time, because it's for you to put a mark, say, okay, I did this, let's celebrate, and tomorrow or in a week we'll decide the next steps. So this really helps you to boost the productivity. I became better at this all in the last few years. So absolutely, take time for yourself, treat yourself well, and put yourself in the best condition. So I really loved this presentation. It was all very, very well done. Also, of course, on time, the perfect. And yes, sorry for the word. Yes, thank you. So
thank you so much.
Yeah, check him. We left the link in the description for him, for Abbey, and also for Emmy, which is coming up for our last presentation of the day. So thank you so much. This is not, of course, just for developers, but we know developers are always busy people. They always so much to learn. We always have to improve. So I think time management, especially for developers, it's very, very important. I feel that many developers have this issue because you know how tech is. So it's overwhelming by architecture. So that's tech. So thank you so much for helping us with your precious tips.
Thank you.
Presentation.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Okay, we have the last presentation of the day.
Hello.
Of course, last but not least, Emmy. So Emmy, I met her in London last year, I think. I'm jealous because she made a pair presentation. This is still on my achievements to unlock. So basically doing a presentation with Amanda, and of course Emmy. She works.
You got it,
She works at Wix. She travels, conferences, speaker, super communicative. So I'm really looking forward for this. What is your presentation about? Let's make an intro. When you want, you can share your screen, and please introduce yourself.
Yeah. So thanks for the intro. And I have met Francesco, which is funny because I think this is the first time we're talking like online and not in person.
It's true.
Yeah. Normally I get talks for a little more technical, like low code topics, but this one is one that's very near and dear to me. It's about ADHD in the digital world, and just generally about human attention, which I'm always really interested in as someone who just really enjoys learning psychology and like neuroscience, and intersecting that with my role in tech. So I'm excited to share this with you all.
Absolutely. And yes, this is probably the first time that we actually are on the call. So I think we met 2 times, and this is the first time that we're actually doing this in a digital format. So usually people do the opposite, say, oh, finally we met in person.
Right.
So that's but I think the opposite part is easier. So yes, thank you, Emmy. To be honest, I'm a huge fan of like topics like not super technical sometimes, because these are like literally for everyone. So really looking forward for this. If you have some questions, just drop them in the chat and we'll ask them later. Emmy, best of luck. I know you'll crush it, but I'll say you good luck anyway. And
thanks,
bye.
Francesco.
Bye.
See you later. All right. So I guess you guys all know what the talk is about now, but we'll be talking about not just ADHD. If you don't have ADHD or know anyone who does, if you're just online a lot and struggling to focus sometimes, this talk is for you. I'm Emmy, and I'm a developer advocate at Wix. The first thing I want to say is I'm not a mental health professional, and if you feel like you do need one, please see a professional. So I had my starts in tech just because I really liked video games, and I'm sure a lot of people can understand the same thing. So I originally wanted to be a game dev or be in esports, and there's me on the left is when I did a game dev camp for girls called Girls Make Games. And on the right is when I had a brief time as a coach for my college esports team for Overwatch. But neither of those worked out. Not great industries to work in, I've figured out. So now I'm just someone in tech with a lot of computer knowledge. But the main thing that video games gave me was not just technical skills. For a really long time, it was really, really bad for me. When I was basically 9 years old until college-ish, it was consuming my entire life in ways that affected me physically and mentally, and there's problems from lingering from the addiction that I still have to deal with. If you guys ever play TF2, that is where a lot of that problem comes from. But yeah, like a lot of concerned parents, I had a lot of ADHD symptoms that I thought were coming from my gaming problems, but it turns out that the ADHD was what caused my gaming problems. I was home alone a lot as a kid, and my child brain was really, really bored and just looking for the most dopamine I can find. And we didn't just have like, drugs laying around, which would be the most you could get, but we did have a computer that went online to play games, and that was the next best thing. And as it turns out, if you have ADHD, you're actually much, much more prone to addiction of any kind, physical, like in drugs, and behavioral, like in gambling or gaming. And there's a lot of misconceptions about ADHD that I also had before I learned more and more about it. Here are some things that are true. Is that one, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder, which means that it's something that your brain inherently has, you're born with, and as such, it's also not necessarily something you can like get rid of or get over. You're also not always hyperactive, which the name attention deficit hyperactive disorder, very outdated. It implies there's actually 3 types of ADHD that we now know of. You can also be primarily inattentive, which is what women and little girls are mostly diagnosed with, hyperactive, or a combination of both. And it's also not necessarily that you have a deficit of attention, you just can't control it. And I know this very well because I could game for like 12 hours and my friends would be like, I'm tired, I'm bored of this. And I was like, I could keep going for 12 more. So it's just that you can't control your attention. And that's what hyperfocus is, if you've heard of that. And a primary characteristic is that your brain has a deficiency of dopamine, and that correlates a lot with attention and motivation, and we'll talk a lot more about that later. So neurotypical brains are based on what's called an importance-based system, where your attention goes to what's logical and responsible to do. So I'm going to focus on my job because that's what I have to do. But the dopamine-seeking behavior of ADHD makes it just hard to do boring stuff, even if it's important. So if you have ADHD, you have what's called an interest-based nervous system, and we can describe the things that are interesting for your brain and what your brain is motivated to do with this ICNU framework, which is what is the most interesting, challenging, novel, or new, and what's the most urgent, which is why a lot of people can get stuff done super, super fast and be really efficient if there's like a really bad deadline. Now, the world doesn't reward this kind of behavior. It doesn't reward you for being like, I'd rather play games than do boring work. But that's just how some brains tend to be, and you'll just have to find workarounds for it. Another thing that ADHD brains struggle with is something called executive function, which in short is all of the frontal brain, high-level cognitive thinking that you have to do. Executive function is planning out a task and executing it to finish, which is basically just doing stuff. And if you have executive dysfunction, you'll have problems with like planning, working memory, organization, impulse control, task switching, and emotional regulation, among a lot of other stuff. So what this might look like is if you tell a child with not a completely developed frontal lobe to like go learn to code, they're not going to know what to do because their executive functioning isn't great yet. If you're an adult, you might think like, what are the steps I need? What am I interested in, like back end, front end? Do I need this to look for a job? What is my first goal? What is the stepping stones to that goal, and what resources do I have? There's a lot of planning that you need to accomplish stuff. But we can all relate to symptoms that ADHDers experience, especially if you're online a lot. And I know that a lot of you might have experienced this. We're just constantly so overstimulated and less focused. And it's so much easier to scroll Twitter than to read a book nowadays. And it turns out the overload of information on the internet can cause a lot of behaviors that look like ADHD traits just because of how it affects dopamine. So dopamine and motivation. Let's talk a little more about dopamine. Is that it's known as the pleasure neurotransmitter. It's an evolutionary tool to motivate you to do things that feel good, like get food and reproduce. And even though it's associated with like hits of pleasure, it's not directly responsible for making you feel good. It's actually what drives you to do more of the stuff that makes you feel good. So that's why lacking dopamine makes it hard to do stuff. It feels like you have no physiological drive to go do that thing. And for the sake of time, I won't go through the whole diagram here, but what is important is that the dopaminergic, the dopamine reward pathway is a cycle. So everything affects everything else. It's self-reinforcing. When dopamine is released in the VTA part of the brain, it activates a lot of what's called the mesolimbic dopamine pathway, and that activation basically tells your body like, that was really good. You gotta keep doing that. And it also activates the hippocampus, the prefrontal cortex, and the amygdala. And they all relate back into each other. So those are the parts that are responsible for like thinking, emotion, memories, and learning. So for example, if you get a strong hit of dopamine from having a really good pizza, you're going to feel emotions associated with that. You're going to remember like, oh, I had really good pizza at that one place. And then maybe your prefrontal cortex is more motivated next time to like, I'm going to plan another visit to this pizza place on next Tuesday. And this is all a self-reinforcing process. So the more you do something that gives you dopamine, the more motivated you become to do it again, which also means that you'll need more stimulation for something to feel as good as the next time. And that's kind of how addiction works, and why ADHDers are much more prone to things like that. So the more online content you consume, the more stimulation you need for it to keep you engaged at the same level. You can't just watch a TikTok anymore. You need like Subway Surfer, a movie, ASMR, like all in the same thing. We have shorter and shorter videos. You need clickbaitier titles, and it's becoming pretty similar to the stimulation-seeking behavior of neurodivergent people who crave dopamine by default. And this kind of online, chronically online dopamine rewarding behavior does have a lot of consequences. So Dr. Gloria Mark from the University of California, Irvine, she's been tracking the attention span of knowledge workers who work on computers, and she's been doing this since 2004 until now, and she still is. Basically, she logged how long it took for them to like be working on a Word document and then tab out to check their email for something unrelated, which we all do. And it's the time that it takes has gone down from 2.5 minutes in 2004 to about 44 seconds in 2022, which is a very drastic decrease. And there's a lot of reasons why we do that. It's just so much easier to switch tasks, and email, social media is low effort, high reward, while focused thinking is high effort, low immediate reward. So there are consequences to this kind of digital attention shifting. First, it resets your mental schema. So anytime you're working on some code, you have this mental model of what you're doing in your brain. When you leave to do something else, you kind of wipe down that whiteboard of notes that you had on that, and when you go back to the task, you have to take some time to like reconstruct that. And second, it takes longer to be back in flow state, which is when you feel like, I really know what I'm doing. I'm being so productive right now. Nobody bother me. I'm just gonna sit down and code. It takes about 23 minutes to get in flow. And every time you switch to something else, the timer will reset. It also takes multitasking can backfire a lot. So sorry guys, having more monitors doesn't just make you more productive. It can actually do the opposite. And these studies are pretty consistent in finding that multitasking not only makes things take more time to complete, but you're also more prone to making errors and just doing things wrong. And multitasking also causes higher actual and perceived stress. So physical markers of stress like increased blood pressure, and people also have a higher perceived workload, which means that people think that they did more work than they actually did because it was more mentally taxing. So how do we stop this? Dr. Mark says we have 3 things to do: be aware of our behavior, number 2, have motivated desire to stop that behavior, and have enough cognitive resources to resist those urges. Now, normally people only think you need number 2, just motivated desire, but that's actually the most easy thing to get. Number 1, a lot of our behavior is just habitual and automatic. Like, have you ever opened your email and then closed it, opened a new tab, and like opened your email again? Like, why do we do that? It's just so automatic and hard to notice sometimes unless you're out looking for it. And number 3 is also hard because we don't always have enough cognitive resources. You might be tired and stressed, and just coding is a very cognitively taxing task. It takes a lot of like complex thinking, and that takes resources. And by the end of the day, you might just want to sit on TikTok and like go on your phone. But yeah, we're human. We're just brains that take energy to function. The brain didn't anticipate the internet evolving to like just give you these quick hits of dopamine, and we can't help that your brain reacts in that same way. But your brain needs resources, and we don't always have it. Everybody struggles with brain function. Some people just struggle more consistently. Like if you're more chemically inclined to seek out dopamine, like if you're neurodivergent, if you have less serotonin from things like depression. And it's funny that Guy presented this, had this book in his presentation from 4,000 Weeks, but I had a quote even before I saw his presentation. Attention just is life. Your experience of being alive consists of nothing other than the sum of everything to which you pay attention. And that's from the book 4,000 Weeks that Guy mentioned. Basically, what you pay attention to becomes your reality. And it sucks when you can't control your attention because you can't control what your life looks like. So you beat yourself up for going on TikTok instead of reading a book. And the gist of it is that we just want to feel in control of our attention and therefore our life. But more often than not now, attention is taken from you forcefully by, the big tech and things like that. Because dopamine, we talked about, it leads to motivation, and motivation can change your behavior and actions can make you buy stuff and spend money and time looking at things and marketing. That's why people pay so much for it, and why the attention economy is worth so much. They know what it's worth. So what can we do about all of this to help people who are struggling with inattention and information overload from the internet, or just have ADHD? The first thing, I guess, instinctually for us as developers is maybe to think about how to design a better digital world. And the key to crafting an attention-friendly digital world is to just respect human attention, know its worth, and know why it's important for people to feel in control, and understand like the biological mechanisms going on, that like it's not all sheer like desire. There's a lot of weird things that your brain can do to motivate your behavior. The Humane Design Guide, which I can link in a bit after I finish is a really good resource for creating attention-friendly apps if you're interested. And if you're designing for ADHD users, you don't necessarily have to have like a special ADHD mode or specialized to design for them, but just know that some people are especially hurt by design patterns that exploit certain things like inattention. So to recap, humane design, but also follow generally good accessibility guidelines from the WCAG, generally good user experience, like for some people, maybe a long form will feel even longer just because everybody has different neurochemistry. If you do want to keep ADHD users in mind, think about a few things. One is the user in control. Is it easy for them to willfully engage and disengage from a behavior? Are you encouraging mindful behavior versus just taking advantage of automatic behavior? Two, can traits of ADHD be a disadvantage, such as impulse control? If you know they struggle with impulse control, don't tempt them with like instant buy methods or infinite scroll. And third, do we deserve their attention? So if you're grabbing their attention, just make sure it benefits them and not you. Like if you do use tactics to, I don't know, drive like urgency and seek attention, like when Duolingo sends you really annoying apps, it's okay for that to be annoying because they know that my interest is to learn a language and that's how they're going to get it out of me. And yeah, that's just the example. And they use things like challenges to appeal to your need for challenge, new things, and urgency, like having a streak. The most important thing as a dev is to just provide value over gaining revenue, and this applies for whatever product you're working on. And it's important to support neurodiversity as well in your workplace and also thinking about it within your users if you aren't already. And there's, aside from ADHD, there are a lot more variations of neurodiversity that you can learn about. And finally, I guess something we can all do is be more empathetic, and that could help you show better judgment, help support others and in the workplace or just in your community. And there are a lot of ADHD devs in the community. It turns out there is an ADHD programmer subreddit, which doesn't exist for any other profession, and it's in the top 5% of all subreddits. So it makes sense to me because I was chronically online and addicted to games, and computers are just like fun, dopamine. But a lot of these people are very scared and anxious and disappointed in themselves, even though they want to do well. And there's a lot of support that can be given to many developers. And I'm sure all of you know someone with ADHD. But we need to create a psychologically safe space for everybody to talk about these problems. And the way you can do that is with forgiveness and compassion. If you have neurodivergence or trauma, you're used to hearing negative things about you, like you're lazy or unmotivated or disorganized. And we can all experience those things in our lives at any point. But if anyone messes up, just forgive them without judging them as a person. Criticism never makes things easier for them, but kind words might stop someone from giving up, and that's super important. And everybody can benefit from the measures we take to support people with ADHD. It can help people in a hurry, people who are really tired or depressed or anxious. You could one day get long COVID and have brain fog and things like poor working memory that resemble ADHD traits. So you never know what might happen. And we're just all online a lot. As developers, you have hobbies that need to use the internet. Maybe like you have to keep going on your Google Calendar, texting friends. It's not something you can avoid anymore, but it still activates the same things within you. We also don't walk out of the womb knowing delayed gratification. So supporting people with ADHD can also help people with lapses in cognitive resources like children or older people as well. And this will help you support everybody around you, and you might be surprised by how many people will benefit from that. And that's all I got for today. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see if there's any questions.
Amazing. I mean, I really loved this presentation. There are so many things on point, and I think this can really help someone out there. So I want to check if you have any question, you can drop it. Maybe I have one question because I'm curious. Like, I think that some people I think there are different levels like of ADHD. So
Yeah.
how maybe the first step, because I first of all, I really loved that this was something very focused on something specific. Like, for example, I did like one for the introverts or something. So it's not just generic tips, but it's for some people. But I think that for them, this can have a high value. So what do you think like it would be like the first step? Maybe if watching this presentation, maybe you have the idea that maybe you have this. You have a level of ADHD, or maybe what would you recommend to those people, those developers who are listening?
I think first, yeah, but you're right. It is definitely a spectrum, and it's confusing when we say neurodivergent because everybody has a different neurotype, just like nobody looks the same. But for those people, I would definitely recommend first is medical attention if that is something that's accessible to you. So unlike things like clinical depression and anxiety, which are a little more complex, ADHD is actually pretty simple in the deficiencies that we have. So if we think about it like a dopamine deficiency, well, what do? We supplement the dopamine and we can do that medically. And we can also have like, what do you struggle with? Maybe you struggle with planning. You could get a coach, or you could seek out methods and frameworks. Like in Guy's talk, maybe all you need is someone to write down the steps for you. So first and foremost is medical attention, therapy, whatever you need. And second, I think would be just to do a lot of research on what ADHD might look like if you do suspect you have it, and know that sometimes, like, if you are neurodivergent, typical like self-help books and tips might not work for you, and that's okay. You just need to figure out your own strategy. And like all frameworks of this type, and like I said earlier, it's always trial and error.
Yeah, for example, this is what I do. I always and I never follow someone else's tips because I don't know if they will work for me. So
yeah, everybody's different.
But it took me like 40 years to reach a decent level, so it took a while. But yeah,
sure.
We have one question by Christine. Do you have some top recommendations for how to continue to be online and interact with platforms that are designed to take our attention without completely opting out? And this is also, I would like to add myself in this, because, for example, I do TikToks for daily dev. So it's part of my job is to create TikToks. So what if you're a developer advocate? What if your job is to create shorts? So you have to take ideas.
I know.
And so
I totally feel you.
Sometimes I wonder, like, am I working because I'm checking like the programmer humor videos or not now, or am I like on a break? So
I totally get it. Sometimes you'll just be scrolling and you'll be like, oh, I'm doing research, or I'm getting inspired. But yeah, sometimes you can't opt out. Like social media is a part of my job too, as much as I really don't like using it that much. And I think the best thing you can do in this case, well, first of all, there are things that set time limits on apps, but if you can't do that, the most helpful thing is probably mindfulness and just practicing pausing every so often to think about, like, do I enjoy this behavior? Why don't I like this? Is it getting in the way of another goal? And why is that goal so important to me? And why is scrolling Twitter not so important to me. And practicing that and checking in with yourself, mindfulness, meditation, it's very, very like cheesy and cliche advice, but I think it really works to be in tune with yourself and knowing what you're doing.
Nice. Thank you so much, Emmy. This was really a great presentation. I don't know if this will be available somewhere. I'm also jealous of the style, like super simple, also the picture. So really great. Not just for the presentation, but also, of course, in how this has been driven. I also saw that there was a part also even a bit technical about how the brain works. This was super catchy. And yes, so thank you. And I think that we are done for today. We are 5 minutes overrun, but we can do it. It's absolutely okay. So now what I would like to do is to invite Guy back and just maybe prepare for next months. So let me remove this. So if you have some last minute question, you now or never. So if you want to ask us something, I see someone kept asking something about time management. I don't know if I can find it, but no, maybe we had one. This was a bit generic, like if any of you want to take it, because it was not so related to the presentations, but like strategies to communicate effectively complex technical ideas. It's not relative to the presentations, but like if any of you want to share your ideas, let's get this question and then we can start to wrap up.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think things like, well, for technical concepts, it's like you just have to know a lot of things that build on each other. So it's like you can't say one thing, because to understand that you have to understand another thing, and then it goes on. I think like visual metaphors and comparisons to things that might be familiar might help. It's just like whenever you learn about like classes and inheritance in object-oriented programming, you might like, they might describe it like, oh, like it's like how animals have species, and then they have like tiers like above that. I think metaphors and like pictures really help.
Yes, Guy, do you have anything on this?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that it's a skill and it takes a lot of time to learn. This is what I expect from senior engineers, but from junior engineers, for instance, I wouldn't expect that necessarily. And I really can relate to Emmy's answer. I think that the concept of reduction, taking like one problem from a very complex world and try to find a very simple way to describe it, this would be the way to go. And it's very specific by the topic, but in general, it's just like a lot of practice and trying this reduction concept.
Yes, absolutely, and really enjoyed this episode, because I think that the soft skills or human skills, how we want to call them, are very important, because especially like in the past 20 years, we have seen an evolution in developers. Developers are not just people coding 16 hours a day, but now they are content creators. They are on social media. We have so many tools. So on one part, like it's very good because we have many more things, but like it's harder maybe to focus because we still have to dedicate some time to coding, and in the meanwhile, of course, focusing on the communication skills. And this is not like an option. Like focusing on the communication skill now, it's a must. It's a must if you want to be a developer. So nice. So thank you so much, Emmy. Abby had an appointment to the dentist, so she couldn't attend this final shout out. Let me do a final shout out, of course, to the organizer of the event. Of course, not me, but daily.dev. So daily.dev is basically a platform that helps you to stay up to date as a developer. Not just this, if you check here, we are working on the community aspect. So this is where, for example, this event was very important for us. So communities, communicating, trying to do things in an effective way. So not just coding, but also all this part. And we are trying really our best. We are putting all our energies into this, into evolving, into being a bit more a social, let's say, tool for developers, not just articles, but we still have, of course, the usual feed, when you can find everything you want. And that's it. We hope this is useful. We are also do this monthly event. I see people always appreciate them. Thank you so much, of course, to the speakers. You are really top class. You always make me feel proud. So thank you so much, Guy. Thank you so much, Emmy. Any last word before we wrap up?
Thank you.
Nice, perfect. So thank you so much. I have another event on September, but we still have to prepare that. So stay tuned, because we'll keep doing this on a monthly basis. Of course, it's called the monthly event, the monthly dev. So this is what we'll do. And yes, so thank you so much again, and see you next month. If you want, just check daily.dev. Bye, everyone, and thank you. Bye-bye.